I did a video a while back that showed how I could get to the first page of Etsy without doing anything other than using very specific long tail keywords in my title and tags. That's a very popular video, but I think it's popular for the wrong reasons. The point of that video was to show that Etsy didn't take 30 to 60 to 90 days to find your listings, and that you could pretty much be found in search relatively quickly after you listed something if people were searching for specific keywords. But people took it to mean this is how to get to the first page of Etsy, and that is not what I was talking about in that video. Basically, the answer to that and any question on Etsy is it depends, but nobody wants to hear that because everybody wants the shortcut and they want the secret formula, and that really doesn't exist. So anyway, I decided to try to recreate that video because what happened in that is I was the only listing on that page for that keyword, but right after I did that video, Etsy changed to the XWalk algorithm and they started filling in related searches on a page, so it's not just the one result anymore, and you really can't do that. So for this, I decided to use some real keywords that real people had typed into my shop and were in my stats, so they had been typed into search and they actually brought someone to my shop, and that way I wasn't just making something up. I found one really weird one, which was butterfly party, straw, and cupcake topper. Now this is an actual long tail search. Someone typed that into the Etsy search bar and it got them to my shop, and then I don't know if they bought something, but they did come to my shop from that keyword. So I found a listing that had been sold out for a very long time, and I added it into the very end of the title, and then I renewed it and I waited to see what would happen. And I saw some really weird stuff. Now, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you might remember that about 3 years ago, things were showing up on page 17 if they were a new or a renewed listing. When Etsy expanded the number of listings that they actually rank to 1,000, that kind of moved to page 21 to 23 or somewhere around in there. It just depends on how many ads there are. But that is not what I was seeing in this case, and I did use keywords that had fewer results so it would be easier to find the listings, but they should have been right at the very end if they were waiting to be ranked. Now what I have started seeing recently, and that's kind of what I was seeing here, is that if you type in the exact word order of something that's in the title, it will bring that listing up higher in search if it's a new listing or something that's renewed. Now it's not working the same way with older listings, but that does make sense, and I'll get into that in a minute. Now you might say, well yeah, Etsy likes exact word order. That's what I do in the title and the tags. I'm not talking about tags at all. I'm just talking about title. And Etsy has not required exact word order to be in the title or the tags for quite some time. But for a new or renewed listing, they might be using it a bit more. When they started filling in the search results with listings that didn't have the exact words in them, just so that customers would have something to look at, listings that didn't have the keywords from the search query at all in the listings were showing up in search results. So clearly there was no word order matching there. And if we look at the search query butterfly party, straw, and cupcake topper, I don't use those words in my listings, especially the straw, in the way that cupcake is spelled. So I don't use those in my listings too much, but Etsy clearly did show my listing for that because people came to my shop after they searched it. Or at least someone did. I think one person came to my shop. So I listed this listing, and after about 10 minutes I came back to see if I could find it anywhere in the search results. I started on page 21 to 23 because that's where I expected to see it. That really wasn't what was going on. The weird thing is that I was finding it in different places, in different pages, depending on what browser I was using and if I was in a logged in window or an incognito window, so Etsy didn't really know it was me, and it was moving around. I kept coming back to check on this at different times, and you know, a few times it was on page 5, then it was on page 1, and in a different browser it was on page 3. There really was no rhyme or reason to it. But just the fact that it was on page 1 in any capacity made sense that Etsy is actually looking at that exact word order match to figure the listing out. And that does make sense because at that point with a new listing, Etsy doesn't have any information about that listing, and the only thing they have to work off to figure out what it is the information that we give them. I've talked about SEO and what Etsy SEO really is now in another video. I'll link that at the end. But basically, if Etsy has no idea about what a listing is because it's new, the only information it has to work with are titles, tags, categories, attributes, and now the description. And so that's what it was looking at to decide what this listing was. Now, in general, most search engines do prefer an exact word order match because it does show relevance. And in this case, Etsy clearly was looking at that to put this brand new listing on the first page of search, which is exactly what I was doing in that video that I talked about at the beginning. But at that point, Etsy wasn't filling the results in with related searches, and now it is. So so listings that aren't exactly right might come up in search, even though yours is still going to be up at the top. But then I thought, okay, look, well, Etsy kind of knows that my shop is full of butterflies. So maybe that's why they're showing this new listing, because those keywords are in there. So I decided to try something new. I had already seen that the exact word order thing kind of was a thing while we were doing one of my eShop program lives, because we do workshops every Friday. And one of the members had a question, and we kind of noticed that the exact word order match was bringing her listings up a little bit higher. So I knew that this kind of was a thing, but I decided to test it by putting a keyword in a listing that wasn't related to the keyword at all. So I went to my stats again. I found a keyword that was pretty specific and someone had actually used it to come to my shop, and I put it into a listing that was not that thing. So in this case, I put a silicone mold keyword into a wafer paper listing. So I figured that if Etsy did find this listing and put it pretty high up in search results, it was definitely looking at that keyword phrase in the title, because there's nothing else in that listing that would indicate that there's anything to do with these keywords. So I did the same thing with this listing. I added the keyword in at the end of the title, and after about 10 minutes, it was doing the same thing as the first one, but with a weird kind of twist. It was bouncing around between page 1 and page 5, or in some browsers, it was at the very last position, which is what I would expect for a new listing. But about after half an hour, a variation on the word order was actually making that listing rank higher than the exact word order. So what the heck? However, 10 hours later, like late in the day before I went to bed, I checked it and it was sitting right up at the top of search, exactly the same place as the first listing. So what this tells me is Etsy really is paying attention to exact word order for specific long tail search queries, and that's how they're ranking that listing, just because there was nothing else in it that had anything to do with those keywords. Now, like I said, this is the same thing that was going on in the first video that I did that is now kind of outdated because Etsy wasn't filling things in. But it does show that that exact word order match is kind of important. So I unlisted the second listing because that's not accurate for those keywords. I don't need it to be found for that. But I did ask the people in my eShop program to go in and look to see where the butterfly listing showed up for them. And pretty much every single person saw my listing right up at the top or very close to it. And the only differences were people in Canada and other countries that I don't ship to. They didn't see it at all. But in Canada, they saw more Canadian listings first, and that's because there's localization there. When they switched their location to the US, my listing came right up at the top. Now, the point of this is not that you need to find an exact long tail keyword word order match with high search and engagement to put in your title. Because if you understand how long tail keywords work, those don't really exist. And if they do, they're rare and magical and you should use it. The point is that Etsy is still taking long tail keyword strategy very seriously, and they're using it to decide what to put up at the top of search, and then everything else that's related will just get filled in. So what are the takeaways from this? Because there's kind of a lot going on, but it's really not much different from what I've been saying for a while. The first thing is that Etsy still finds your listings very quickly. It doesn't take 30 days. It doesn't take 60 days. If people search with a specific keyword, they will still find your listing 10 minutes after it's listed on Etsy. As far as understanding what the listing is, that's where more search factors come in. And again, I will link to another video at the end of this that you should watch to understand that. As far as how long it takes Etsy to find your listings, the answer is pretty much right away. The second thing that we can take away from this is that Etsy still looks at exact word order match as an important factor in where to rank a listing, especially when that listing is newer. That means that you should still be researching your keywords to find short tail keywords that have good search and engagement, then adding more keywords to it, like I've always said how to do it. So don't cancel your Marmalade subscription quite yet. The next thing that we should take note of is that I didn't put that exact word order phrase in the tags at all. So that means that you can be found in search for specific keywords that are only in the title. So all the advice that you get about you have to put everything both in the title and the tags in order to be found in search is complete nonsense. It has been for quite some time, but I hope that this shows you that that is not true. And yet another thing to notice is that I put those exact word order match keywords at the end of the title. I filled in the entire title space, and Etsy found both of them and put them both right up at the top of search for that match. match. So Etsy is looking at the full title. It doesn't prefer shorter titles necessarily, and you really should fill in all the title space. It sees the whole thing. The shorter title thing is kind of a Google myth. Google sees the whole thing too. Etsy sees the whole thing. Use up all the space. But I think the most important thing that we can take away from this is that Etsy is using other things other than just keywords to present things to people on the search result page, because if they weren't doing that, then my listing would probably be the only one that showed up, or one of very few. And my other listings probably wouldn't have shown up next to it because they don't have those words in them. For a new listing, Etsy doesn't have any information about it other than the fact that the keywords are in it. And that's the most important thing that it's using to rank for a new listing. For the older listings that also showed up on that page, it's probably things like the sales history, the reviews. There's all kinds of other things that Etsy is using to present things to people on the search result page. So is this going to change how I say that you should do your SEO? Not at all. I have not changed the way that I've done SEO for the last 5 or 6 years, and there is no need to change anything now. We know that Etsy is not working the same way that it used to. It's gotten more sophisticated. It doesn't require only word order matches in order to show up at the top of search results. But it's still doing the same thing where it's hopping around in the title and tags to find matches to the search query so that it can decide what to show to people. Now, if you're in my eShop program, we are going to be talking about this in more depth tomorrow in our live weekly workshop, which we have each week because it's weekly. So check the link in the group for that. If you're not an eShop member, just keep doing SEO the same way that I've always said to do it, which is to find a good short tail keyword, use that, high search and engagement, put that in the exact word order in your title, and then add more words to it to give Etsy more information about your listing so that Etsy can do the matching to what people type into search. As far as going into your stats the way that I did and finding a keyword to put in there, I wouldn't do that unless it's something that brings a lot of traffic to your shop, and that's probably going to be a more general and a shorter keyword. But it wouldn't hurt to go into the listings and look at the stats to see what keywords are bringing the most traffic, and then just making sure that that keyword is in the exact word order in your title, because that is not going to hurt your listing and it probably will help it based on what I'm seeing. So watch this video next, find out what other factors go into Etsy search ranking, and I will talk to you later.